when I was, 6, 7, I started getting like little bits of gear here and there. I've got, you got me that tiger, what was it called? The sunburst or what? It was called a sunburst, but it was like
M&E
the
tiger.
plastic guitar. And then
Yeah.
when I was like maybe 12, I feel like somewhere around there, I got the Carlos acoustic, and nothing was really sticking. And then when I turned like 15 or so, you gave me the PV Decade along with that Bentley acoustic electric guitar.
Oh no, it was a Sonic.
Well, you
It was
gave me a Duo Sonic, but the Bentley
yeah.
was first.
I had that Bentley right up until I bashed it and did an El Kabong with it.
I feel like the way that went was the Bentley came first, and then you got me the Duo Sonic, and we swapped on a visit.
Oh, okay. I
I
don't
think
remember.
that's what happened. I had the Bentley for a couple of months or something like that, and then you needed it, and then I and then you had got me the Duo Sonic
Yeah,
after. But
I had that little PV amp, practice amp sitting around,
yeah,
and then I had that Duo Sonic that I don't even know where I got that. It was cheap,
yeah,
and I gave you that, and that's when the next time you came for a visit, you could play a little bit.
yeah. I started learning like some Blink 182 songs and like pop punk that was, popular at the time. I took my guitar over to my buddy Jared's house, and Adam was over there, and he was like they were showing me some stuff, and so I kind of started to like gain interest. But it is interesting for me now with, Nicholas being almost 7, and he's starting to show interest as like a guitar playing dad, or just a dad in general who has an interest that they want to share with their boy or whatever. Like, for me, I can't even put my finger on why I want him to do it, So I was wondering if you could offer any insight on that.
Well, I'd have been fine either way if you did play or didn't play. I mean,
Right.
as it turns out, you once there was an electric guitar to play with. Then when you by the time you were 14 or 15, when you came down, you were picking up a Les Paul and stuff. You weren't,
Yeah.
you know, but and you got steadily better. We didn't have all that much time we spent together to like just sit there and noodle on guitars.
Yeah.
So uh, at first, like I said, I didn't know if you were going to get into it or not. Playing acoustic guitar hurts, even when it's set up.
Yeah.
You know? And so there was pain involved. The Duo Sonic, you found that easier to play, and it was plugged into something, so you were making noise.
Yeah, you could make crunchy noises
Yeah.
with the Duo
So
Sonic.
and there was, as far as the gear, uh, there was no thought process. Oh, I got this. Here, take it.
Right.
I'm not playing it. I just took it in a trade or whatever, and here I'll give it to Sean. Let him try it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the fun part. I did that, like, I have all these guitars and pedals and stuff like that. And, if Nicholas is like wanting to play or whatever, and he's like, I'll let him use a pedal to make some different noises or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
when he feels like it. But I think that's the fun thing is like these are, as a grown man, like this is your version of your toys. And then like
Right.
your little buddy, your little recreation, your carbon copy is like, oh, I want to play with dad's toys, and so you're just like, yeah, man, here, and
I never had a pedal board until
no. And
you know.
actually that's interesting because I never, and we'll touch on this, but I never used pedals
No.
until like 3 years ago.
I didn't get. I had a tuner. I always had clip-on tuners or whatever, and I relied on the amp du jour for my rhythm tones,
Right.
and so I didn't. I didn't rely on pedals,
Right.
and I didn't start really getting into pedals until shoot the first iteration of the love handles. So I was in my 50s, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah, I have a similar trajectory. I think Nicholas will probably be into pedals a lot
yeah.
sooner because I'm into
Well,
them now.
you got a bunch of them. So
Right.
I didn't have them around, and
Yeah.
so as a strictly rhythm player, and for most of my time in bands, being a lead vocalist and a rhythm guitar player, playing classic rock, I didn't need anything really except clean and dirt.
Yeah.
I need a little clean, I need a little dirt. By the time I got into that first iteration of the love handles and we were doing Motown and stuff like that, uh, I and more pop type stuff, I found a need for a delay
Or some
and
chorus.
chorus, which I had a chorus pedal, but
Yeah.
and still have it. But um, and then this last time around with the second iteration of the love handles, I went pedal crazy. You know, I got far too many pedals, and I got the Mustang 50.
Well, pedals are an interesting side quest with guitar playing because they don't take up any space.
Well,
And they
and
don't
how you have
well, and they don't usually per pedal, right? Like per guitar, you're talking
right,
a couple cubic feet of space, whereas per pedal, you're talking cubic inches. Like it just like they can just be over here and literally like they're so much less expensive than a guitar or an amp that like you can really they can
right.
pile up on you quick. But I wanted to just touch real quick on where the PV decade came from, if you remember how you ended up with that, or
I do not. I was looking for a little practice amp. Okay,
Mhm.
when I was playing with Nobody's Business, my first band, I had that Power City refrigerator that came from Kent, brought it from Holland,
Okay.
made in Holland. And it was literally, and I'm playing rhythm on about 15 songs that we did, is all. The rest of the time, I just handle the vocals. And that thing weighed a ton to haul that around. And he had traded me something for that amplifier. I can't remember what it was. And so I took it down to Apple Music, and people not from Portland, it's not Apple, the computer people.
Right.
It was to be an Apple guitar store in Portland. I took it down to Apple, and first the salesman made fun of it. Then the owner, can't remember his name right now, it escapes me, but he plugged it in and he told the salesman, give him whatever he wants.
Was it real quick? Was it the sound? Is it a Sound City amp?
Yes, Power City.
Power City.
Yeah. And it was made in Holland. And it was a Marshall stack clone is what it was. It
I'm
was meant
seeing that. Yeah, I'm gonna put a picture up. That'll be that's pretty cool, actually.
that's the first electric guitar amplifier I owned.
Dang, man, that's a
It
big boy.
it was huge. It was I don't know if you remember in that rental house we had that was in that back side lot. We had a big room toward the back of the house,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't have furniture to put in it, but my amp was in there. That's all that was in there was my amp and my Les Paul.
Yeah.
That was pretty much all that was in there.
Is that you're talking before Kelsey was born?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, your mom was pregnant with Kelsey,
So
so
was
you were
that
3 me, you
Was
know, you
that
were
the one that I flipped on and played
yeah,
and
yeah,
woke everybody up?
yeah, because it was set to ear bleed.
Yeah.
So, which was on that amp was about 2. I couldn't get it over 2 ever.
Right.
Anyway, so I took that to Apple Music and I traded it straight across for a 1970 71-ish, I can't remember the exact year, Vibrolux.
Okay.
Silver face Vibrolux. Man, that was a cool amp. But it was still really heavy.
Yeah.
But I kept that for 2 or 3 years, and then John Peterson's brother Matt bought it from me, and I wanted to get something smaller, and so I bought a PV practice amp just for at home, but I still needed something to gig, and I think what I had was a 12-inch PV. Everything was PV then.
Yeah.
We're
80s.
talking 80s here, man. Everything was PV.
Right.
And so I bought a PV 112, and I don't know what the model was on it.
Yeah.
And I bought that Rage or whatever it was called practice amp that had a 8-inch or 6-inch speaker in it. Or
And
is it 10? I
hung
think it was a
on
10.
to that. That one just kind of sat around the house
Yeah,
forever.
that one I just had, you know, it was a grab and go kind of practice amp.
Right.
I never liked the way it sounded, to be honest with you. And
I don't know that I actually ever liked the way it sounded either, but that's a good segue into I can't remember what happened to that thing, but I know that the next thing you got me, and I think it was like my 17th or 18th birthday, was the Behringer amp.
yeah, I got you that for Christmas before I gave you that Telecaster.
Yes.
So that was when you were like 16 or 17, I think.
Right.
And that I went and bought that outright at Guitar Center for you for a birthday present.
And that was the hold on, I have the name of it really quick. I just gosh, I can't remember the name. It's like the GT 100 or
yeah, it's when all these amps started doing. Behringer was inexpensive, and they were offering all these multi effects. This I don't even know if Line 6 was around then, as far as like the Spider type amps or anything like that.
It's the GX 210. That's what
Yeah.
it was called.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Like the amp was colored whatever it sounded like, and then you could add an effect at a time, kind of a deal. They had some presets where maybe it was like chorus and distortion or something, but I remember it was just preset driven. There was a pedal, and so I was playing the Duosonic through that in my in my bedroom, and I took that amp to college with me, and I remember that one fondly. I don't know if it's because it was so much better than the PEAVEY. You know what I mean? Like if it just was, that was my previous frame of reference, but I do remember the Behringer amp pretty fondly, which is interesting because nowadays they have such a bad rap. They just put out that line of like vintage inspired pedals, which look really cool, but I liked that amp. I thought it was cool. And yeah, that's the amp where I had the Duosonic, and then you got me the Grad Telly, and I really like when I was in Walla Walla in Spokane, I was like really sitting down and playing guitar, a lot. The Behringer amp, what happened to that? I believe probably got sold.
Before that, I gave you that Behringer maybe a year or two before that. I was still in nobody's business. And I bought that Fender 185 HALFSTACK.
So is that the picture of the head that you sent me?
Yeah, that's the head. I don't have a picture of the amp
Sure.
that I could find, but the actual one, but it had a I think the cabinet was 4/8, and then and it was a Fender cabinet too. I bought it at Horseshoe Music, I remember, and those red knob Fender amps, I had a couple of those during that period, during the late 80s and even the early 90s. I had a gray, I don't know if you remember, a gray fabric covered Fender red knob amp.
I do remember that amp, actually.
It
Now
was
that you're
112, and it was a cool amp. Actually, I liked it.
yeah.
That 185 was just a really cool amp, and I kept it for a long time, and then I traded that in on that valve state.
Right.
Mark, big mistake, huge.
Well, you say that, but
Well, for me,
that was not a huge mistake.
Sonically, by then I was playing with Dave Wright's other band, and I was in the country band. I was in Quarter Horse with Craig.
Yep.
And I was playing with Dave and Mark in that Inglewoods, we were called.
Yeah.
And that Marshall just didn't do the job.
Now,
so
that kind of leads us to the, how your early playing days sort of ethos and how that like bled into me, because you gave me the valve state when I started. Basically, I think when I traded you the grad telly for the Les Paul, and then I think you let me take the Marshall with me, and the Behringer amp was probably gone. I had that Digitech.
You didn't have that anymore. Yeah, you didn't have it anymore.
I was actually playing through that Digitech effects pedal via headphones or my computer speakers only at that time. And so you gave me the Marshall, and I took both of those things to Spokane with me. And the Marshall had a foot switch, which isn't pictured in the image I sent. But this one, correct me if I'm wrong, the valve state had a tube driven.
It had a little tube preamp.
Right. So it was like kind of tube-ish.
Yeah, I think it had a 12XA7 or whatever little tube, and that they used in the preamps on Fenders. But the post didn't have any tubes in it.
Right.
It was just a preamp.
Now this amp, it caused some problems within the band because I didn't have money then at all, and they wanted me to get like a bigger amp. I was like, this is what I got. And they're like, okay. So my bass player ended up buying me one of those tilt stands for it so it could be a little louder. It wasn't a problem at the gigs because they would just mic it, but in band practice you couldn't really hear me that well. And
it wasn't.
No, and I mean, like we would juice it to like 11, and it would, but I will say this, it really suited it's funny because it had the clean and dirty switches on it, and I just bounced back and forth between those two tones, depending on the song that we were playing, and I never needed anything else because a Marshall gain is a Marshall gain. That's plenty of crunch for rock and roll music. And the only problem it ever caused was during band practice was, it wasn't quite loud enough to keep up with the PEAVEY Windsor or whatever the other guitar player was playing through. But I loved this amp very much. I mean, it stayed with me for a lot of years. Funny story, when we were trying to record, so we recorded the sort of EP situation, and we had some new songs, and we were going to re-record everything at this guy's house in Spokane. He had a studio in the basement. It was pretty professional, but he was not. And I left my amp at his house, and then he was like trying to extort money out of us for nothing that had been done.
Yeah.
And basically we had just gone over to his house and brought beers and like played around with recording stuff. And he kept this amp, and my bass player was like, no, he's like, F that. And so we drove over there together and got it back. And I had it, you know, until we moved. Maybe I sold it, or maybe I brought it back to Portland. But I think it probably got sold for rent money or whatever. I just was so broke all the time.
Right.
And so, you know, luckily the Les Paul never went into the pawn shop. I had a hard line on Excalibur, but other stuff certainly did. It probably went in the pawn shop and I never had money to get it back. But yeah, and then
I think you did pawn that.
I think so.
Yeah, I think you told. I remember you telling me about.
Had to come clean.
Yeah. Now, somewhere in there, in that period when you were in Spokane and stuff, you had taken the valve state Marshall, and I needed something a little lighter for the country band and with Dave and those guys. And I bought a Fender, and I still had it up until Anna and I met. I still had that amp. It's a little Fender digital, or not digital, but solid state. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Let me see if I got a picture of that. Let's see. It had an acoustic guitar setting on it. So it was a 112 solid state amp, and it had a nice acoustic setting and some other nice settings for electric. Mm-hmm. And it didn't weigh anything. And I don't know if you remember me having that at the house, but let me see if I can find, I think in this.
And it wasn't a early Mustang amp, right? It was like,
no, I guess you could kind of call it a precursor of those, because it was, that it? No. And I'd also by then gotten that the hot rod.
Was it the Fender G deck?
No, it wasn't a G deck. Let me see if I got a picture of that thing. I know I can't remember the name of it. Somewhere I have a picture of me playing it with the love handles. Mm-hmm. And the first iteration of the love handles. And it was a nice little amp, and I kept it a long time. I had it right up until through when I was living with Jim and Connie, and because I had sold my hot rod.
Right.
And then your Uncle Steven bought me a used DeVille and sent it to me rather than a hot rod. He bought the wrong one. That thing weighed a ton. And I had that for a while, but it was just too heavy to gig with. So I bought another hot rod.
Yeah.
And then my buddy from the last band, the last iteration of Love Handles, had this special edition, limited edition, and so I sold that one and I bought this one from him.
Right.
So anyway, but it was a digital amp or solid state amp. It had some nice little settings on it, almost kind of like the, but it wasn't a G deck. I just can't remember.
The FM 212 or FM 112 or the Fender Champion or something like that.
Yeah, it was kind of like a Champion. As a matter of fact, I owned a Champion later, and other than it not have the Champion, didn't have like a good acoustic setting on it. This one had an actual acoustic setting for an acoustic guitar, not to make an electric sound like an acoustic, but it was preset for plugging an acoustic electric into the amp.
That's cool.
Anyway, I have to research that further. But anyway, somewhere in there I had that, and I had other acoustic amps. I had the Acoustasonic.
Yep.
The old tan ones that they made.
The Troubadour back here.
Yeah, I had the Troubadour that you still have.
Yep.
And I bought that one. I bought that Martin. We went out and I bought that Mexican Martin. Yeah, boy,
that Troubadour amp is great. I used that on. I forgot to feature that on here. I totally forgot about that one. But
nice little amp for acoustic.
Little 1.8 or a 110 in there.
Yeah,
and you could plug a microphone into it. And so for singer-songwriter gigs, it served me really well over the years. I've kept, and actually Nicholas plugs his drums into it, and so he can play amplified, and it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So let's see.
We went off on a tangent there.
We did. It's okay. Tangents are welcome. The Crate Club 40 or Club.
The Crate. I was trying to remember where I got that. I was a little bit of a drinker back then, and I don't remember where I found that. I think it may have been that I got it from, hold on. Hey, I got a picture of that. I got it from this guy, Tom, I think, that was into Love Handles for a while.
Well, that amp is certainly one of the coolest ones I've ever had. It's the only full tube amp I think I ever owned or, had in my possession. I gave it back to you eventually, but it had broken, right? Like one of the something stopped working on it, and I, being basically a technical novice at the time, I had no idea. And there wasn't Guitar YouTube back then.
Right.
Not at this level of prominence that we have now, but that thing roared. I remember, so up above here in the background, I've got the picture that we took of all the guitars in the garage. And that Ibanez, which I always thought was called like a GT or whatever, but it's this Ibanez with the it had Filtertrons in it, or maybe just some really hot humbuckers. But that Ibanez, I would plug in to that Crate amp, and it just, like, when you turn the gain up on that Crate, it was crazy. Really hot amp, and it went super freaking loud.
It had a great saturated tone.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted it, because again, I wasn't into pedals. I had a distortion pedal somewhere, a purple one, that early one of Boss's, and I hated it. And so I went by the drive that the amp produced in combination with the pickups I was using. So that reminds me, that amp, when you gave it back to me and I needed to get rid of stuff, when I moved in with Jim, I sold that and I plugged it in and it was working.
When you sold it?
Right. And I hadn't touched it. Okay. It sat for like 4 or 5 months. Untouched. And I said, well, let me plug this thing in and see if it's working. I plugged it in. It worked. It sounded great.
Yep.
I left it sit for, I don't know, a couple hours, plugged in, and it was still working. So I turned it off. I put it on Craigslist. The guy came over and didn't even plug it in. He just took it.
Oh, wow.
Gave me what I wanted for it, took it.
That's crazy.
So, and I also at that time had that segues us into the Gibson Goldtone.
So the Goldtone, we have the picture of the Crate, the Goldtone, and the Hot Rod. And then there's a Mesa 410 cabinet over there. I don't know.
That is Dustin's, and he used that as his keyboard amp.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what that's there for, because Dustin was leaving that at
like prime Love Handles cover.
Yeah, This was probably right before a rehearsal because we rehearsed right there in the garage.
Yeah.
So the gold tone. Do you remember I had bought the very first thing I ever bought on eBay that almost cost me a divorce at that time instead of years later was a Country Gentleman Gibson. Here's what happened. So I bought the Country Gentleman,
Yeah.
okay, and it came, and Edie saw the box when she came home from work, and she said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's really pretty." And then I told her how much I got that for. Now I'm going to defend myself because I got that for $1,600, and near mint condition Gibson Country Gentleman.
That's good price.
That's
Even
it.
back then, that's good
Even
price.
back then, that was a $2,900 guitar,
Right.
with case and everything. Okay, I couldn't keep it in tune. I'm sorry. Bigsby. That's my first and last Bigsby guitar. I would never buy a guitar with a Bigsby. I could not keep that thing in tune no matter what I did. And it was a Gibson, and it wouldn't stay in tune. So anyway, long story short, she got very mad at me because of what it cost. It wasn't like we couldn't afford it. I didn't ask her, you know, spend that kind of money. And anyway, I kept that guitar. It was hanging up in my office upstairs. I think I kept it for a year or two, year and a half. And then this guy puts this Gibson Gold Tone on Craigslist. Now, I had just seen Aerosmith and Johnny Lang and that's what Joe was playing through. He was playing through Gibsons at that time. And I saw that Gibson Gold Tone, and I was like, oh, man. Now, Trace Elliott made these for Gibson. So I got to get that. So he was he wanted $1,800 cash or a hollow body electric guitar of equal value. Yeah. And I had that Gibson that wouldn't stay in tune. So I went over there and to his house on the west side and sat down and plugged that Gibson into this amp.
Yeah.
Plugged the Country Gentleman into that amp and tried it for a little while he was doing something in the kitchen. And I went, yeah, I think I could do this, you know. And so he sat down. He goes, I don't even play. This is for my uncle. He's doing it for his uncle, but he strummed a little bit on it. And he went, okay. And so I almost killed myself carrying. He had these real long stairs. That thing, you remember that?
It was so heavy.
That is the heaviest amp I've ever owned. Even that Power City weighed less than this thing.
I could lift up the next amp we're going to talk about. I could lift one up in each hand, and it would weigh half as much as that Gold Tone.
Yeah, this Gold Tone, just moving it around the garage. Yeah. And I didn't want to. I knew I probably wouldn't keep it, and I didn't want to because they were out of production by then. I didn't want to drill holes in it. Right. What I wanted was in the bottom of the chassis of this thing was the second amplifier. Yeah. It had double amplifier. You couldn't access that without a pedal. Gibson didn't have a pedal. Trace Elliott didn't have a pedal. I wanted to hear what that thing could do wide open with both amplifiers running.
Now, real quick, before you keep going, the pedal, it wasn't just any like A, B.
No.
You couldn't just plug in a Fender switcher pedal.
It was 9 pins.
Yeah, right.
In a specific, it was Trace Elliott made it, and it was specific to this amp and a couple of theirs. But you couldn't just grab any Trace Elliott pedal and hope it would work.
Right.
Because it had to be. Anyway, long story short, that led me to it was sitting there, and all this time I couldn't find that pedal for it. And I don't even think you should call it a pedal. It's a controller.
Yeah, it's like a key.
Yeah.
It's like a key to a second engine in a Ferrari or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm on this gear page back then. Can't remember the name of it. I haven't surfed those in years and years. But anyway, I knew that Joe Perry was in one of the guitar groups I was in, because those that know, Joe is a gearhead.
Yeah.
And he loves talking about gear. And if you get him started. And so he was in this group. And I knew it was him. One of the other members told me, he said, you don't, people didn't like out him, and stuff. They gave him his, but most of the main people in the group knew it was Joe.
Right. And
so I PM'd him, and I said, hey, word on the street is this is Joe Perry. And if you are, that's great. I'm not going to out you in the group or anything. But I have this, and then I told him this whole sob story about this Gibson Goldtone and how I needed that Trace Elliott, the pedal that Trace Elliott made to unlock that second amplification or amplifier. And he said, I'm sorry, I only have 2 of them, and I can't let them go. Ooh. And he had no idea where to get one.
Right.
He said, if I sold you one and one of my other one broke, I'd be screwed. I hope you understand. And I said, no problem. But that was really cool that he even answered me.
Yeah.
And so once I knew I was probably never going to find a pedal for that thing, that was when I said, well, I can't carry it around.
Yeah.
And it's just sitting in the garage. When I wanted my ears to bleed, I would go out and plug it in and rip.
So loud. So loud.
It's so good though.
Yeah.
If I could have that tone in the size of a hot rod,
right?
I would have been in heaven. So anyway,
great.
So that story about that one. This particular hot rod that's in this picture, the neighbor that lived across the greenway behind us, he used to walk through when we'd rehearse, and he saw that I had, interestingly enough, it's in this picture, my Protone Telecaster.
Oh yeah, the thin line.
Yeah, the thin line Protone from Squire. He owned one, and one afternoon I was out in the garage, and he stopped. He goes, "Hey, I hear you guys playing." He goes, "I play, and I live over here." And introduced himself, and he said, "I have a Protone Squire too." And I said, "Oh, it's a great guitars," and blah blah blah. And we jammed a little bit one time. And anyway, he had 2 of these hot rods, and he sold me that one.
Nice.
Yeah. And then about 3 months later, he was at Guitar Center, and they were closing out those Gretsch reissues, and he bought 2 of those orange historic reissue Gretches.
Yeah.
And that's where I got that. He bought one for him and one for me without even asking me. He said, I figured if you didn't want it, I could sell it somewhere else.
Oh,
but I took it. And so that was my tone for all the rest of the Inglewoods, and some of the Love Handle stuff was that orange Gretsch and that hot rod.
I feel like when I'm on the internet, the hot rod, it gets like a really bad rap for some reason. I mean, I feel like it served what you were doing so well, and I never really like played through it a whole bunch because I wanted like really high gain or whatever. But it always sounded good at every gig that I ever went to. I mean, I just feel like that was, and maybe it's just a thing where that's kind of the tone I grew up around. So it sound, but everybody's playing through Princeton's, and you've got a hot rod, and the hot rod sounds great.
Right now, speaking of which, I found a picture of that amp in my files. It was in fact a Princeton 650.
Okay.
So if you look that up, it's a 112 solid state Fender amp. It's got a little triangle badge on the top front of the cabinet, right
I
side of
see
it.
it.
Yeah. And had a foot switch. And I used that for gigs where I was playing acoustic and electric. Started taking that because it weighed a whole lot less and I could do both.
Okay.
And so that after a while, that became my main amp for a while until till I wasn't playing anymore. So, well, it was definitely.
I think I remember the badge.
Definitely at the house.
And the tuner. I remember the tuner being in it. Yep. I do remember.
Yep.
I played through that quite a bit, actually.
I think you did too. So that was a good little amp for a solid state. And I like the acoustic with, going back to that other picture, the Breedlove acoustic electric that I had sounded great on that acoustic setting in that Princeton amp.
Yeah, because I remember that because that was before you had your, Fender Acoustic 200 or the Acoustasonic or the Troubadour. You had that.
I had that.
Yeah, and we played the acoustics through that thing. I remember that amp. Yeah, that's a great amp.
Yeah.
This one, 5, my 5th amp.
The Line 6?
Line 6, Spider 3 half-stack.
I actually, that was never at the house.
Only if we did a band practice at the garage, right? Or no?
I don't
think. I think you're right.
Yeah, that was when you and Ryan were living there. You did not have that amp, or at least you didn't have it at our house.
Right.
I'd have remembered that beast. You were using my amps.
Yeah. I use primarily the crate.
Yeah.
So I got this.
I don't know what you used when you guys went and played at that club downtown.
I used this.
Yeah.
I used this when we played at the Ash Street Saloon. I used this.
I don't know where you were keeping it because it wasn't in my garage.
I feel like it was in your garage for a little bit.
Well, you know how I was back then.
Yeah, but I do. I mean, not long. It maybe because we moved out basically really shortly after that. When I was working on Uncle Alan's house. So we weren't there long, but I bought this. It was a Craigslist buy. It was like probably my first ever thing I bought on Craigslist. And it was $250 for a half stack. So I guess the sort of, we were playing like grungy, like garage metal stuff.
Right.
It was not well put together. And to me, it was like, this is just some like I had that that Line 6 interface, the UX2 or whatever it was, the computer interface, and I was using the Line 6 tones to produce music from home. So I was like, well, the Line 6, like, these are the same tones. So if we go gigging, then at least I'll have that sound that, we've been putting on our little demo CD or whatever. And I know that this thing is like, it's not a gold tone. It's not, it has. I was watching a Tom Bukovac video the other day, and all the guys were like, he was like, so what do you guys mostly sell here? Line 6? And the salesman, they show all the vintage amps on the wall, and the salesman goes, all Spiders. We got the amps and we put Line 6 Spiders in all of these. And so it's kind of like the butt of a joke for, real like tone junkies and stuff. But I tell you what, that thing was loud and proud, and I kind of liked it. Like,
they say you could, depending on what you're playing, you can wring the tone out of it you need. So
Yeah, and I didn't have any other pedals. It was just the presets and the volume foot switch, which you can see there. And I found it super useful. I was super into like Coheed and Cambria and like,
Right.
progressive, post progressive hard rock and stuff like that. And it was I didn't have the same problem with that amp as I did with the Marshall valve state. Like that thing was loud as all get out. So I had that for a little while, ended up selling it before I moved back to Palouse after Portland. And I really liked it. And then I went for another stretch without an amp. And I ended up getting, like, when I moved back to Portland, um, I think you were living with Jim at the time, and I was, like, renting that room, but I bought this little crate. It was at Goodwill, and I actually looked it up, and it's like a crate 10 watt, hold on, I've got it here. The Crate XT10, which was just this really terrible sounding practice amp. It was like full circle, man. I was like back to the PEAVEY decade, like that's what it felt like. But
I don't know. I have any idea how many during the 80s and early 90s, how many different PV amps I owned. I swear, I had at least 5 or 6.
right,
But the only crate I've ever owned was
was
that the club.
the
Yeah.
club.
Club
Well,
50.
I'll tell you this. Those 2 crates were not created equally. Um, but I love to, like, go hunt the bins at the big Goodwills down there, and
Yeah.
I found this Fender bass cabinet with the speaker in it, but with no head,
Mm.
and on just so happened that that crate, the, um, the amp portion of it, the amp head was not hardwired into the speaker. It was 2 little
Oh, yeah.
cables.
Yeah.
So the cables were still in the back of that Fender. It just didn't have an amp head. So I brought it home. I bought it for like $6 or something.
Yeah.
And then I brought it home and I mounted the crate head into it. And actually, after I did that and running it through a bass speaker, it was not too bad. It sounded
Oh,
pretty good.
I knew a guitar player that he didn't end up playing with us, but he came over to audition, and he had a some kind of Fender head. I can't remember what it was. It was one of those vintage style heads, but he played through a PV Black Widow cabinet,
Mm.
one 115. That's what he was playing through, an actual 115-inch Black Widow cabinet.
Yeah.
And it sounded pretty darn good, as I remember. So,
I mean, it's kind of a weird thing where, like, so, there are a lot of people. There's, the tone wood guys, and then there's, the pedal guys, and then there's the amp guys, and like the speaker guys, and everybody has their own little guitar
well,
universe they live in on YouTube.
some guys are all those guys.
That's true. If
They,
you go to the
they,
gear
will,
page, you'll find
they
the
will
same guy in all
argue.
those.
Yeah, they will argue about tone wood while they're plugged into a digital modeling amplifier.
Right. And
Kind of negates the argument. If you've got a guitar with a tone wood and you're plugging it into a modeling amp, you're defeating the purpose.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've always, and I don't know how I got that way other than limited resources for many years.
Uh-huh.
I just, and it's what I was playing. I mean, I was playing classic rock in a 5-piece band,
Yeah.
little rhythm guitar, and I just didn't need all these different tones. And by the time I got to that last go around with the love handles, there was so much varied music there that all of a sudden I was like, oh, man, I'm not really sounding anywhere near what that rhythm player did on this
Right.
particular song. I really need some delay here, or or I need a little better crunch than I'm getting. So I started buying different pedals, and instead of buying more amps, but I did go through a few amps during that period. I started having some disposable income, and Anna never really cared what I bought. She never said, "Why did you spend $1,600 on that guitar?" She said, "Why?" She said, "Why did you sell that one? It was beautiful."
Oh,
You know,
that's the sweet spot.
yeah, like when I sold that Paisley Stratocaster, she was mad that I sold it because it
Right.
was so pretty. But anyway, there just came a point where pedals made more sense than buying a different amp. And I got the Mustang, and I gigged with that for the last maybe 3 or 4 months of the love handles before I retired.
Mhm.
But the tone presets weren't, they didn't really fit. I was still using some pedals along with it.
Well,
So
I mean, we'll get there on that for sure, but, the nice part about the GTX is how well it plays with pedals.
yeah, and the presets were decent. I found a
Yeah.
lot of the presets. I still have the ones I used then in my phone, and they're, I only use maybe, I have my own little list save. I use maybe 10 presets.
Yeah.
So,
So that was my little monstrosity there. The next amp that we're moving on to is that Yamaha THR-10 that you gave me for a while.
mhm.
That thing was great. I lived in an apartment and we couldn't really, I
Get
couldn't,
loud.
yeah, you just can't. And so with the THR-10, I had the headphones, and honestly, they just look super awesome. And you see Weston there
Yeah.
playing his first chords on Excalibur, but I really like that amp. That was kind of what I was using when I first started putting up guitar videos on Instagram and stuff, and I was finally starting to take, so this is like, I'm 35 at this point, and I'm finally taking guitar seriously. There she is.
This is the acoustic one.
Oh, that's the acoustic one. Those are cool too.
I sold that one. I
Yeah.
sold the one you gave it back to me.
Yep.
I sold it just about 2 months ago. They're just sitting here. I'm not using them. I'm in my own shed now. I can plug them in whenever I want.
Right.
And I don't really play in the house very often. If I do, it's just acoustic. So
Yeah. But I mean, for the apartment, this was like perfect. There were some presets, there were some effects you could dial in and things. I mean, I think Yamaha is really starting to come into their own as, like, they have the multi effects pedals now. I think that they're doing modeling really well, and then they have those Rev Stars that they're guitars that they're doing. And I mean, I'm waiting for a Yamaha THR head that can plug into a 412 cabinet, because I just feel like that's the next step for them.
yeah, I think they don't want to go after that.
I don't think
Mark.
they do either, but they could.
They would have done. They would have done it. I think
Right.
they're content to pursue the niche market that they have for these small portable amps that work on a battery.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're really good.
I actually took that one to. I had a little side when Anna and I were first together. I had this little gang of people that were getting together in this little house in Beaverton and just playing some stuff. Not really going to be a band, quote unquote. And I took this over there with the tailor I had at the time, and just wasn't quite loud enough, but it was pretty close for the volume we were playing at. So I would just plug it into this little PA and from that amp into the PA.
Yeah.
And it worked great.
That's a nice feature that those things have too.
Yeah.
Is you can go direct and it sounds really good.
Yeah.
So not much to say on that one. It definitely it's sentimental to me in a way where like I had that's what I was playing on when I really like I discovered guitar YouTube, and everything just kind of like my brain opened up to the fact that I was basically a mediocre, less than mediocre, like novice guitarist. And I knew nothing. I had been getting by on instinct the whole time, which is fine. And it served me well. And I had a lot of fun living in that, you know, ability level, like swimming in that. But I was like looking for a little bit deeper of an understanding, I guess. And then I started taking lessons. I was using that thing. So it's kind of sentimental to me in that way, as far as just that type of amp. Like, it's not one of those things where like, oh man, I wish you wouldn't have sold that. Like, it's not special. There's a billion of them on earth, you know, but it is a cool little amp. And for somebody living in an apartment with 2 children and a dog and a wife, like it served me really well. My final amp, and we'll talk about this because we were already, but the GTX 100, quite frankly, out of everything that we just talked about and how much I've loved like all of the amps you always had, and I got to play through, you know, hot rods and gold tones and like this amp is my favorite amp I've ever owned. And it's not because of all of the effects or even necessarily the tones you can get that are on board. It's literally because I can take that Line 6 Pod Go and plug it direct in, and basically the GTX acts as a FR cab, and I can wire that thing. It has XLR outs, so I can go direct into either a PA or into my interface like I use on the internet. And it's basically seamless. There's no weird, like glitchy sound, like, you know, there's no like it's, and I can just, it's a Fender, so I can just crank it. And it gives me all of this flexibility that you just won't get, you know, volume levels. So like if I want to play at night with the headphones on, or if I want to record a video, I can have literally be recording, but not picking up the live speaker sound, but I can have the live speaker on. So I'm recording direct. I'm hearing it through the amp. I'm hearing the music out of the monitors on my computer, so I can just play with raw emotion, like with the volume way up, but all you hear is a nice tight recorded sound through, you know, through my OBS or whatever. So to me, this is just the best amp I've ever owned, far and away. And I haven't owned a bunch of like crazy awesome amps, so I don't know everything. I used to play through that Blues Junior you had at the apartment. I like that thing too, but the Blues Junior setting on that thing kind of sounds like a Blues Junior. Like,
yeah. Oh, I lied. The Blues Junior reminded me. I also bought one of the Crate Delta Blues. Is that a Crate?
Let me check
it. At Crate Delta Blues.
Crate Delta.
It was tweed
amp.
No, it was a PEAVEY. Never mind.
It's the PEAVEY. Yes,
that was a pretty cool amp. That was a pretty cool amp.
I saw one of those on sale around here, the PV Delta Blues amp,
Mm.
uh, or the PV Classic 30, which
Yeah,
is a tweed
yeah,
Blues Junior style amp. And I have heard really great things about the Classic 30 and the Delta amps. Those are
I bought that because it was a dad whose son went off to college, and he'd been telling him for 3 years to get this thing out of his house. And he would not get it out of his house.
Yeah.
So I bought it for, I don't know, I think I gave him $275 for it.
Mhm.
With a 16-foot monster cable that sells for, I don't know what those sell for when they're that
Those are
long.
like $200 cables, I
I
think.
know. And I turned around and flipped that.
Yeah.
So
Cool
that,
amps though.
yeah, cool amp.
But the GTX one, like, honestly, if this thing lasts me, like, the pedal, like, if they last me, if it doesn't break or whatever, I really won't need anything else. Like, I have found a really satisfactory tone. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't lust after other amps from time to time. Like, well, I think you have one inbound, the Supro Delta. Um, that's a great looking sound. It's very attractive amp. Or
I
the Black Magics, the Supro Black Magic amps. Those look really cool. And I look at like little mini half stacks here and there from time to time, or the Black Star St. James, little half stack where it's like 212s and the head fits on a 212 cabinet. Those look really cool, but realistically, I can make all the noise I want with this thing in any way that I want it to be made, and it sounds really good. And I only know that because you've given me so many different, paintbrushes over the years and had so many lying around, that I know what amps sound like. I don't, but
Yeah, I do not need another amp. I wanted to sell this, get what I paid for it, and it's probably worth more. The hot rod DeVilles are selling now, or hot rod deluxes they're selling now are $900 or
yeah,
whatever for a new one, for just a plain old black one. This one's a one or 99 that's limited edition Jensen speaker,
voice.
but I only paid 450 for it, so that's all I wanted to get out of it.
Yeah,
And plus everybody around here is broke, and I'm not shipping an amplifier. Not
no,
that one anyway.
yeah,
And this guy offers me, and you and I had talked about a Supro, because I really like those Supro Deltas, the videos I've seen of them. And
they sound awesome.
I just need a nice, springy, clean reverb, nice, clean sound, and a little crunch, and be able to make it a little crunchier.
Yeah,
When I sit and noodle anymore, that's all I do. I do cleaner crunch. I don't I don't get out my pedal board. I don't plug it in. And I play electric so little anymore. It's not even funny. And since I got that Gibson songwriter, it's just always an acoustic. I
yeah.
grab one of these guys back here.
Well,
So
that's an interesting way to, sort of frame the end, back to the beginning where, I was talking about, getting your kid started, how you got me kind of, and you just, like you said, you just had them around. So when I came over, it was like a point of interest, whether, little, big or little, but they were always around. And I've done, taken the same approach with my kids, and they have interests. I get them little toy guitars, like, and then the other day, Nicholas played until he had a blister on his thumb. And I said, okay, I think he might do it. But it was like, you always played You always played in service of whatever song you were singing. So singing, I always felt like singing was actually your real instrument.
Yeah, that was all I wanted to do, was to be able to sing, and and sometimes in a band
Yeah.
you just have to be able to play some good lead guitar or good rhythm guitar, and that's
Yep.
all I ever wanted to be. When I get people comment and say, "Well, if you're, you're kind of old, you should be better by now." I didn't want to be better. If
Right.
I if I spent all the time you've spent sitting there doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
would I be at your level now? Probably. Did I care to? No.
Right.
I just wanted to be able to sing and play some decent rhythm. That's all. I did not want to show off. I didn't want to do a lead ever. I didn't care if I ever did a lead, ever.
Well, you certainly accomplished playing good rhythm. I don't think anybody like, as far as playing rhythm chords and being able to do that while you sing, which is a difficult thing, especially on any one given particular song or another. Um, there are some songs that I cannot play and sing at the same time.
Oh, we all have a few of those.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as a in time rhythm player, you're basically a cement mixer at this point. So, people can say you should be better. And it's like, why don't you play a song, pick a tempo, you play a song, we'll hear the click track for 2 seconds. I'll play at that tempo the whole time, and you play at that tempo the whole time. We'll record it, and then we'll see who's off by the end of it.
Yeah, we experienced that when we traded those. You said I was when you went to go add a drum track to a rhythm track I sent you.
Yeah.
You almost were able to do it. It did get off.
It was literally like a fraction of a second off at the end. So
Yeah,
you were a
yeah,
fraction of a fraction off somewhere in the song, and it exponentially grew to a fraction of a second. It was like 0.7 seconds off. And
yeah,
like I wasn't as good at like chopping and splicing at the time. I could probably have fixed it. But
yeah.
yeah,
And
you
that
sent
was
me that track and it was like on beat and you didn't click it.
no click track.
Right.
I'd never use a click track. I just sit here and play.
Yeah.
And so I do have good time. I
Yep.
can keep good time.
Exceptional. I mean, I would say, like, what skills are you focused on? Because
Yep.
I have good rhythm because you gave me good rhythm, because we are rhythmic in nature. Like, Nicholas can hold a beat on the drums. Like,
Mm.
it is in our DNA. Somewhere along the line we have good rhythm, but I can't. I couldn't have done, something like that, where I haven't practiced rhythm guitar as much as you, because I've always had one foot in the lead guitar space.
Right. Right.
And I always had reservations about fronting a band, and that I I don't know if it was like I feel like I should be more humble or like whatever, but I just always had reservations fronting a band. I remember I wanted to set up where Dieter and Andy were over here and I was over here. So I was by myself, but I wasn't covering up Tommy in the stage setup because I wanted people to see him too. And I was just like a little too what would you say, apprehensive to lead, I guess. And so I don't know. I'm not sure why I uh kind of went on the other side of things from you in that regard, where I just always kind of wanted to be better at playing lead guitar. But um it's just interesting, I've like this lifelong sort of adventure that we've kind of been on together. And I've got two boys that are kind of jumping on the train. Luna's obsessed with guitars. Like, she's always like, oh, and like, get that down, let me crawl on it, or whatever. She likes to pluck the strings. And I don't know. I just thought it'd be fun to run down these amps. Guitars would probably be a 5-hour episode, so we probably
Oh, at
better not
least.
do that.
No, we have to do that in a whole bunch of phases.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it'd be like a 7-part series.
yeah, I'm slowly trying to sell. I have 3 for sale right now, and I'm starting to sell them off. There's ones that I obviously want you to have that I'm going to keep, but
Yeah,
some of them are for sale, and I just don't. I come out here, I plug an electric in, I bang away for about 10 minutes, and then I say, okay, I got something to do out there, and you know,
yeah,
so I'm going to pare it down to where I have three or four electrics and 3 or 4 acoustics, and call it good. So
nice, nice.
yeah.
Well, Pop, I better
Okay.
get back to it, but thank you for joining me on the journey through my amps. I'm gonna slip this in somewhere. I don't know. Tone Deep is kind of starting to become my interview series, so I may put this on there, but we'll
Okay.
just, we'll just see. But anyway, yeah, appreciate you.
Okay. Love you.
All right, Pop, love you too. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.